Whoa. Hey, did you hear that? The couch is like making a weird click sound.
Piece of candy?
Oh, I love some.
Some soft candy?
Yeah.
Piece of candy?
Ooh, please.
Piece of candy?
Yes, sir.
Piece of candy?
Hi, it's Mike, and today we're going to be talking about respondent conditioning. You may have also heard this called as classical conditioning and Pavlovian conditioning. Where does that come from? It all started with Ivan Pavlov. If you remember the classic study where he was working with dogs, he was working on their salvation. He, through this conditioning process, was able to get a dog to simply salivate from hearing a click on a metronome. I wrote a bell because it's easier to draw a bell, and a lot of times people think about it as with the bell. But just think of that tick, some kind of sound. Boom, sound happens, dog is salivating. What happened? Well, what happened is Ivan Pavlov did a total classic experiment, brand new, like, whoa, what did we do? And what did he do? He did respondent conditioning. Three terms, those all mean the same thing. Why do we use respondent? Well, because the behaviors under question, what we're measuring, the salvation, they respond to some stimulus, some environmental effect they respond to. A stimulus is presented in that learner's environment, a response happens, a respondent behavior. So these are going to be things like reflexes too. If you think of respondent behaviors, those are going to be reflexes. It's a reflex to salivate. You don't really think about a lot of reflexes. You're startled, things of that sort. But it is a reflex. You smell food. Your digestive system starts to work for you. It's not controlled. We don't have the ability to say, all right, start salivating. We can, try to bring up spit, try to do things like this, but we can't really get our GI tract to start going. So when we talk about other major conditioning in our field, operant conditioning, when we talk about those behaviors are behaviors that operate on the environment. So I'm not going to get into operant conditioning, but just wanted to point out, respondent behaviors respond to the environment, operant behaviors operate on the environment. So moving forward with this, anytime I have to use the word unconditioned, I'm just going to draw a U. So this is my cheat sheet here for you. I'm going to erase this because I'm not writing unconditioned every time. It's just not going to happen. So I'm going to use U for unconditioned, C for conditioned, N for neutral, S for stimulus, and R for response. And if you see these mixed together, you see U, N, unconditioned neutral. That's not a thing, but if you see UN, that's what that means. So let's get right into it. Well, what we have here, using all these terms, there's a few things that we need to understand. So we're talking about reflexes here. These are things that you don't have to learn, things that you as an organism are born with. And so anytime you're born with something, or you don't have to learn something, you can always think of that as unconditioned. So we have unconditioned, and then there's stimulus. An unconditioned stimulus is something that we, as an organism, respond to without any previous training. Water. You don't have to be like, you know what? My parents never taught me that I need to drink water, so my body can't take in water. No, you're born with the ability to take in water. You're born with someone jumps at you, you kind of, jump, you startle. That's not something you're trained. You might get into a debate there, but I would say it's a reflex. I don't really got to do it to a baby. See if a baby jumps. If a baby jumps, then you're born with it. Otherwise it's learned. Getting something blown into your eye, like dust hits your eye, you blink. That's a reflex. You don't have to be taught to blink in defense. That just happens. So when those are all responses that we're talking about, they're unconditioned. We didn't have to learn them. Unconditioned responses. So we have unconditioned stimulus and we have unconditioned responses. And that's the natural environment. That's what happens with no learning, no training. We're presented with unconditioned stimulus, you're going to get an unconditioned response. Dirt's going to blow into your eye. Didn't have to learn about dirt getting blown in your eye. And you do the unconditioned response. You blink, that's what happens. That's the nature. I'm sure a lot of animals do that, not just humans. So, really, the next thing we need to know about are neutral stimulus. So, what's a neutral stimulus? Something that has no inherent ability to alter some organism's behavior in a way. So you can see if it's not a bright light, but like a dim flashing blue or red light, nothing. That's no reflexes are gonna occur. A neutral stimulus. Think of the bell. You ring a bell to a dog. Cool, awesome. That the dog is hearing a bell. Nothing happens there. So you have a neutral stimulus, and what happens after a neutral stimulus? Nothing. It's neutral. There's just something that's going on. So really, the magic in conditioning happens right here. And what we're trying to do is condition this neutral stimulus to have the same exact effects. They're probably not going to be the same, but they're going to resemble the effects that an unconditioned stimulus happens. And so what happens is first you have to present the neutral stimulus. You got to go neutral stimulus. Boom. Pair it with the unconditioned stimulus, something we haven't learned. And what are we going to get? Again, we're going to get that unconditioned response because it's not learned. We have unconditioned. Dirt hits our eye, we're going to blink. So now a blue light goes on. Dirt's getting blown into your eye. You now blink. That happens. So having that neutral stimulus, having that blue light occur beforehand is not going to stop you from blinking. So it's still going to happen. You're going to have that. And what will happen here is this presentation, neutral, unconditioned, over and over and over again. Eventually, this neutral stimulus is going to be learned. It's going to become conditioned to be a stimulus. Oh, now, what does the neutral stimulus do? Neutral stimulus allows you to take out this, have now that is a conditioned stimulus. All that, they come together. We have a conditioned stimulus, and now we have a conditioned, because it was learned, response. And the conditioned response is the unconditioned response, probably on a different magnitude, probably not the same duration. But you're going to get, eventually, through this pairing, you're going to see a blue light, and your body is just naturally going to defend itself and protect for that sand to get into its eye. Because what can happen in nature? What's better than getting sand in your eye? Being able to detect that sand is about to come in your eye and engage in that same response, which is closing your eye so dirt doesn't get... Now, instead of getting the dirt out of your eye, you stop the dirt from getting into your eye. Boom, very good evolutionary response. So our reflexes, they help us. And then having this respondent conditioning process will help us again become better, more safe, we have more defenses. We're able to now take something that was neutral. Don't know why. For whatever the environment that I'm living and learning in, when a blue light shows, reliably, sand gets blown into my eye and I blink. Now, when I see a blue light, I blink. So there's a few extra things when it comes in this, but this is that in a nutshell. So Pavlov rang a bell, made a tick. I'm going to say rang a tick for you sticklers out there. Made a tick. Oh no, didn't ring a tick. Presented food. My bad. Unconditioned, unlearned. Presented food. Boom. Dog salivated. Like, oh yeah, we're going to eat food. We got to get ready. Our digestive tracts. Got to get ready to eat food. Boom, happened. Ring a bell. Nothing happened. Ring a bell, presented food. They started to get ready to eat. Believe it or not, when you ring a bell and you show them food, they get ready to eat, just like you'd get ready to eat if there was no bell. Eventually, just rang the bell, and he was measuring that salvation. And he's like, it's still happening. There's no food. But that behavior is still occurring. It's still happening. So that's what happened with Pavlov. That's what he found out. And in psychology, I'm going to keep saying this as a theme. Either you try to describe what is happening with a word, or you name it after someone. That's what happened. So Ivan Pavlov found it out. We call it Pavlovian conditioning. I don't know what the history is behind calling it classical conditioning, but I know eventually call it respondent conditioning because respondent describes what's being conditioned. So with respondent behavior, the response is being conditioned. So I might if they ask me, what would you call it? Maybe reflexive conditioning. It's only for reflexes, things of that sort. All right, so a few extra things you can do, and I'm not really fluent on these, so I'm not going to talk about them, and I didn't look it up. There's going to be blocking, overshadowing. There is evidence, a little bit of evidence, I believe, if you take the neutral stimulus and present it after this, but like in between, or maybe at the same time, that it can and will eventually serve as a conditioned stimulus. But really the best way to do it is boom, boom. Neutral, unconditioned stimulus. Over time, we get our conditioned stimulus. Yeah, neutral, unconditioned response. So you can also do, I think it's called second order conditioning. So now what we could do is continue this and have a new neutral stimulus. So we'll call it neutral stimulus 2. And what's going to happen with neutral stimulus 2? Nothing. So with our sand in the eye, now there's going to be a tone. It's going to so now it's going to be nothing happens. Nope, nothing happens. That is not anything that I need to pick up on or behave because of in the environment or react to. So we do this. Now we do neutral stimulus 2. Oh, guess what we pair it with? We can pair it with that conditioned stimulus. What are we going to get? We're going to get that conditioned response. If this continues to happen, if this does not go through extinction, and this continues to serve as a conditioned stimulus, oh, same exact thing. We just repeat this step. What happens? Now we got conditioned stimulus 2 and conditioned response 2. I don't remember for sure what the literature says, so if you do, please email me if I'm wrong or try to correct me. I want to have right information out there, but I'm not going to work really hard to get it. I'd rather just kind of have a chat, kind of informal. You know, we're not getting CEs right now. This is not in place of school. This is just to talk about some behavior with everything that's going on. So I imagine that the conditioned response 2 is going to be a lower version or less magnitude, less duration version of conditioned response, and that's going to be a lower magnitude or lower duration of the, what was it, unconditioned response. So could be wrong. If I'm wrong there, correct me. But you just keep doing this. To get extinction, you want to extinct this, you want this to go back to neutral, what you do is you never pair it again with that unconditioned stimulus. Continue the light this, the light this, the light this. Eventually, you're just like, it's been a while and sand has never blown into my eyes again. You're gonna quit blinking because of the blue light. It's eventually you're gonna have respondent extinction, and now this light has not resulted. It's now no longer been paired with that since it's been gone for so long. But no, you get rid of the blue light, and then it's gonna happen. With all this is just catastrophic. What's gonna happen? Or not catastrophic, but it's just all these are gonna go away. Yeah. One really cool study they did, like, what's the purpose of knowing all this? Am I really going to respondent condition someone or my clients? The more you know about this, the more you can help your clients. It's in our science for a reason. And one application that I saw of it that was really awesome is they have the unconditioned stimulus of getting chemotherapy, like for cancer. They have the unconditioned response of getting really sick from the chemotherapy. We have the neutral stimulus of the hospital. Hospital does nothing. So eventually, after that, putting it together, that hospital became a conditioned stimulus, and they started getting that conditioned response of being sick from just going to the hospital. And I think there's even reports of just driving by the hospital. You think about it, like, well, we go there to get chemo. Chemo's going to make you sick. No, you got follow-up appointments. What about if that's not just where your cancer doctor is, but also your general practitioner, your GI doctor, anything, any specialized doctor? Maybe they're all in one building. But because you're doing your cancer treatments, anytime you go to any treatment, you get sick. That's not a life that anyone wants to live. So what they did is they said, what's really important with this? What stimulus becomes conditioned? Well, the one that has the closest temporal locus to that unconditioned stimulus. So what you want to do is you want to have minimal time in between here. Time, minimal, a small amount of time as you can. So going to the hospital, things like that is very delayed. And we have a lot of language and verbal behavior, so we can bridge some of these gaps that if we weren't an animal that used, advanced verbal behavior, this might not happen. But with humans, it's demonstrated to happen that the hospital becomes conditioned. Going into those rooms, it's the same check-in counter, it's the same parking lot. A lot of these stimuli are the same, but it's delayed. A lot of those are pretty delayed. So they took a mint, just gave you like a little peppermint or wintergreen. I can't remember what flavor they did. I was told at one point, but they gave it to you right before the chemo. So it's chemo, mint, boom, right there, mint. It's in this little packaging still. And then the hospital building was here. So what happened is, if you learned a lot of detail about that blocking, overshadowing, all that stuff, I'm not sure what it's called. I'm sure it's one of them. But the mint stopped that. So now that hospital did not become a conditioned stimulus. It stayed neutral. That mint took all those conditioning things, became the conditioned stimulus. So what happens for a greater lifestyle? What happens at the end? They no longer eat those mints because it makes them sick from the conditioning effect. Because every time they get chemo, they have the mint. But the hospital no longer has those kind of factors, those kind of respondent behaviors occurring due to the presence of those stimuli, which you have to go to. You have to go to the doctor. You have to do all of this stuff. So that was just one of the coolest applications that I remember ever reading about as far as respondent behavior. Last thing I want to touch base on real quick is, I know we brought up operant. Today's not really about operant. Today's about respondent. But something that kind of goes with that. So, what's his name? Pavlov was doing the SR. We have the stimulus to the, I'm actually going to draw that lower. He was doing, stimulus, boom, unconditioned, condition, whichever stimulus was going on, to the response. That's what we got. We got this as the reflex. We had Watson over here. Watson's doing we got a response, and then we have reinforcement to a stimulus. And reinforcement, once we do the operant, when we go over operant stuff, we'll talk about reinforcement is just a stimulus. So really what happened, this all got put together, and now we got S, R, S. This is the 3-term contingency. Whenever we talk, we got a 2-term contingency here. We have a 2-term contingency here. 2 and 2. Do we have 4? No. These are the same. So when you're looking at operant conditioning, this R is going to operate on the environment. When we're looking at respondent conditioning, this R is going to respond to the environment. But really, we have this full 3-term contingency here. So that's why when we talk about operant conditioning, we have a stimulus here, but it's not conditioned, unconditional. Well, it really is, but really what it is, it's discriminated against. Not against, but it's discriminated. We also have S deltas. What do we have? SDPs. All those things. So that's where that S comes from. That's why we call it. So why don't we call it a discriminated stimulus? Why don't we abbreviate it DS? Well, it's SD because it's this, and it's raised up because it's that stimulus that we started with, that bell so long ago. A response, whatever type of response we're talking about. And then here, this one only really comes under respondent conditioning because we don't have it here. But what we have is reinforcement. That's why it's SR plus for reinforcement. We have that stimulus in the SRS literature. We're working from what we already have. We're not reinventing anything. So we do that. We also have minus, P minus plus, lowercase, uppercase. Those all mean something else. So that's where we get it. You start with respondent conditioning. We end up why we have to call it an SD and explain to some parent, some RBT that doesn't care, someone who's interviewing to be an RB, why do you call it an SD? It's a DS. Well, read the literature, go back, learn this stuff, and you'll know why we call it an SD. Well, I think that's it for today. If I said anything wrong, always please email me, behavioralcomedy@gmail.com. Don't forget you can like, subscribe, comment, all the buttons. You guys know more about it than I do. Let me know what else you would like to know about. If you have any questions about this, anything didn't make sense, please let me know. But other than that, hope you enjoyed, hope you have a good time, and stay safe during these times we're going through. Candy or carrots? Candy or carrots? Candy or carrots? Candy.